Unscripted vlog time. I just wanted to do a video talking about the current state of my religious journey, or lack thereof, as you will find out. Um, this will be unscripted, but it will be edited for time. So, to start, I grew up very secular. I did not grow up in a religious household. My mother, by the time I was born, had only recently rediscovered her Jewish heritage. And my father is not a Jew, and he was or is, or I'd say he's more of a humanist now, but back then he was part of sort of the whole skeptic movement, atheist movement, and I remember him having quite a very prominent sort of distaste for religion. That might just be my young brain kind of misremembering things, but Um, I didn't grow up very religious. I went to Passover Seder's with my family. I celebrated Hanukkah, that sort of thing. I had been going to my synagogue since I was in diapers, but never attending really any services until about the COVID pandemic when I sort of rediscovered my Jewish heritage and um, started to get really involved in like Ashkenazi Jewish culture, European Jewish culture, if you want to call it. Um, and that was my sort of gateway into this whole um, journey that I've been on. And I started attending services at my synagogue. It was a Reform synagogue. Um, it is a Reform synagogue, but that led me to becoming very proud of being a Reform Jew specifically. Um, I still have a great amount of respect for the founding fathers of the Reform movement, both in Germany and America. They made some mistakes, but I think ultimately their values were in line with a lot of mine, particularly the kind of rationalist mindset that they were promoting. Um, but like as I was learning about classical reform Judaism and um, this world that I had not been privy to in the history of reform, I started to kind of wonder exactly where that sort of chutzpah went when it came to the radical reform and the changing of the liturgy and the abandoning of the idea of the redemption of the temple and all this, and the rationalism and the ethics and the universalism is like the prominent, like most important things, whereas now you have like the ethics and universalism and um, rationalism kind of taking a sidestep to more traditionally religious stuff. What with the that platform, I can't remember which one it was, but the platform that deemed the new values of the reform movement were going to be God, Torah, and Israel. And I just wondered like what happened. And part of it was Zionism, part of it was the Zionization of reform. But I think ultimately, if classical reform Jews were to survive and their values were to survive, I think reform would have had to basically take a step beyond religion and become basically a atheist, secular, humanist sect of Judaism. But they couldn't do that. They couldn't. And with the Zionization of reform, all that progress kind of disappeared, and they kind of steeped back into religion and the kind of wooey stuff. And I just thought that like at some point I realized that my pride in reform was actually becoming more pride in a classical reform, which is effectively a kind of Judaism that no longer exists. And also, there's the aspect of my my quote unquote religious belief. I had become religious on and off and have been religious on and off for like the past long time, since like the COVID pandemic. But I think when I've been religious, it's mostly been like, I can't remember what Religion for Breakfast calls it, but like the social conditioning thing where you're kind of like doing something to fit in with a group more than doing it because you actually believe in it. Like when I was doing religious stuff, when I was talking about religious stuff, in the back of my mind there was always that little atheist, that little humanist saying, well, we obviously know this isn't real. You're kind of LARPing as a religious person to fit in with your shul. And ultimately, my discovery of classical reform kind of snapped me out of uh, that sort of fantasy I was living. And so I began to look for alternatives. And one of the alternatives I found was secular humanistic Judaism. I have a lot of mixed feelings about secular humanistic Judaism. Granted, I don't really know that many secular humanistic Jews, um, from the actual like establishment movement, but from what I've seen coming out of like the higher sort of echelons of the secular humanist establishment, I like their sort of their chutzpah when it comes to like changing the liturgy and maintaining that kind of classical reform spirit. But at the same time, they're a movement that since its beginning has been so steeped in like Zionism and using Zionism as a replacement for Jewish religious practice. And it's kind of interesting how like um and sort of disappointing how much they kind of use Israel as kind of this uh, like cultural point where they can use that. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like a truly humanistic movement or a truly rationalist movement would kind of at least like even like maybe before in like in the 1960s to like the 1990s or like the 2000s, but 2000s is a stretch, but like really like I think there's got to be a point where you kind of look at Israel and look at how things are going and realize this is kind of not working and it's not in line with our values. I was reading the book The Necessity of Exile by Shaul Magid, and I think a lot of humanistic Judaism's Zionist foundation and continued Zionism um, can be summed up from the first chapter of The Necessity of Exile, where he's talking about how Zionism has exhausted itself and how liberal Zionism is basically a husk that lives still in the 90s. And that's like the one thing that disappoints me about secular humanistic Judaism, the official movement, and also the fact that a lot of it seems to be kind of formulated around a sort of cult of personality of the rabbi who founded the movement, Sherwin Wine. I watched like some videos of Sherwin Wine talking, and I gotta be honest, I do like his charisma, but he seems like a very uh how do I put it nicely? Uh Unpleasant person. I didn't know him, but just like the way he talks about things, he seems kind of pompous and sort of, I don't know, I just get a weird sort of feeling whenever I hear him talking. Um, and it just doesn't feel very compassionate in the way that a lot of the religious stuff does. But I feel like you don't need to be religious to be compassionate, but I think Sherwin Wine just comes from an age of sort of secularism and atheism where a lot of people just kind of were very on a high horse about it and they didn't really understand that religion is something that is just kind of also very human in my opinion. I don't know. Uh, but I found myself kind of troubled by that because I read a book that came out very recently called, let me see here, Contemporary Humanistic Judaism, Beliefs, Values, and Practices. And I found that this book was both incredibly useful, but also incredibly frustrating when it came to certain things. Like, um, I thought it was strange how they took a stance on a lot of weird things like God language. Like they don't allow God language in their movement, and that's fine. But like prioritizing it over the kind of debate about circumcising infants, I don't know. I feel like totally banning the use of God language, even in a metaphorical context, while also saying, oh, well, we leave it up to parents whether or not they want to cut the foreskin off of their baby. That's like weird to me. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they don't want to rock the boat too much to the point where they're like excommunicated from the whole Jewish uh, thing. But I don't know. Some of it is just kind of weird to me. And so I've sort of struggled with it. There's a lot of things I don't agree with, but there's also a lot of things that I think are really cool. I think they do great stuff with liturgy. As much as I think that the God language thing shouldn't be a priority, um, ultimately, it is very cool to see such radically changed liturgy that really reflects a kind of more secular, more rationalist belief in something and all that. And like the idea of like treating all Jewish literature as just as like important as the Torah is so cool to me. Like it's like basically the idea that the Torah was the beginning of Jewish literature and then like going into the future all of that literature still also matters. And I just think that's so cool. But at the same time, it's like there's just some things that are just like the Zionism and the sort of weird sort of rules and stuff that I find a little bit distasteful for me personally. Though I have heard that there are anti Zionist members of secular humanistic Judaism, which I like. I like the fact that they allow that. That's doing a lot more than a lot of Jewish sects are willing to do. A lot of Jewish sects do not even allow anti-Zionists to convert, or they will excommunicate anti-Zionist members of congregations. So um, the idea that you could become a secular humanistic Jew and be an anti-Zionist is very nice, and I respect that if that is true. Um, But I don't know. It's like something that just I'm talking in circles, but it's something that I struggle with. And so I've come to ask a sort of question of myself as it's like, would I describe myself as a secular humanistic Jew or would I describe myself as a Jewish humanist? And by that I mean, would I describe myself as somebody who is part of the secular humanistic Jewish sort of movement with all of its sort of things that I don't quite agree with, but also do agree with? Or am I just a Jewish humanist in the sense that I am more independent? I'm not like part of the official sect or whatever. I'm like more, just a Jewish and then generally a humanist, um, but not like, I like in my like in Passover Seders and stuff, I might still use a lot of and I have during I actually did a Passover Seder this year. I think it might have been this year, um, where I used a passage like a prayer supplement from this book. Um, Here is our light, humanistic Jewish holiday and life cycle liturgy for inspiration and reflection. This is some great stuff aside from like Israeli Independence Day and stuff, which I don't use, but to each their own. I find that a lot of that is really cool. Um, so ultimately, I'm still deciding. I'm still kind of asking if I should like who I am, what I want to be. It can be difficult. Um, Ultimately, it's a choice that I'm gonna have to make because I can't just keep waffling. I can't just keep waffling over and over again. Oh, and if you want one piece of really good sort of humanist Jewish literature, I guess I don't know if I would describe it as like humanist because I don't think it's like it's kind of hard to sort of parse, but it's non-theistic Judaism, if you want to call it that. I would highly recommend this prayer book called "Blessed Are You, Wondrous Universe." Um, who is it by? This doesn't show on the cover. It is by Herbert J. Levine, and the poetry in this is just everything I've looked for. And I think this is like if I'm anything, I'm this. Like, let me read you the opening, the first prayer here. Let's see, morning blessings. This is one of my favorites so far. Morning blessings, wondrous universe, my body works. What must be closed stays closed. What must be open stays open. Awesome cosmos, my breath circulates. What I breathe out, the trees breathe in. What the trees breathe out, I breathe in. Infinite universe, I ask myself, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Blessed living planet, you give me strength. Blessed providing world, you satisfy my needs. Blessed are you, wondrous universe, each day. And that's just so beautiful. And it's exactly what I wanted out of like a more like non-theistic secular Judaism is I just want to wake up in the morning and just thank the universe for just existing. Even though the universe can't hear me, even though the universe isn't sentient like a god would be, I consider the universe to be my god. And I love like just learning about the world and appreciating the world and appreciating everything that I have. And I don't know, I don't think I need a God for that. And I don't know. It's like really complicated right now. But I am hoping with a little bit more time, I might be able to sort of figure things out. I also need to learn how to compromise more. Not like completely compromise, but I just like like don't make everything having to be perfect and all this. So I remember I already talked about this on a different website, but ultimately, even though secular humanistic Judaism is caught in that kind of liberal Zionist like purgatory that Shaul Magid talks about in his book The Necessity of Exile, I think I might just have to bite the bullet because a lot of the stuff that they have introduced is so interesting, and it does feel in a lot of ways like a continuation of that classical reform spirit. And like, if I don't join, then that's one less anti-Zionist in the secular humanistic Jewish movement. And I think my voice, if I choose to speak, would be maybe valuable in adding more diversity, at least, to the pool of ideas within the movement. Um, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. Uh, see ya.